What is up, my brothers and sisters, my agents of respect? It's your boy Trey Johnson back with another episode of the No Disrespect But podcast. Before we get started, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Always feel free to comment. Just make sure you keep those comments respectful. And if you're interested in supporting your favorite podcast of yours truly, the link to do so will be in the episode description. So as we get started, definitely want to give a shout out to both the Boston Celtics and the Dallas Mavericks for securing their bid for this year's NBA Finals. I think we're about to get probably one of the best final series we've had in a long time. I think we have two of the better duos ever. For the Mavericks, obviously Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, and with the Boston Celtics, we're talking about Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And one thing that's probably not going to be talked about as much is just maybe, in my opinion, an elite group of role players and supporting players, I should say. When you think about Dallas and Derrick Jones Jr., Derek Lively, Daniel Gafford, maybe Tim Hardaway Jr. finds his spot back into the rotation. Um, Hardy is doing well. Dante Exum has been doing well. So definitely did well in that Western Conference series. We're talking about Boston. Obviously, you have Drew Holiday, Derek White, Al Horford. Maybe a Kristaps Porzingis is able to play early on when they start June 6th. Um, Peyton Pritchard, guys like that who come in, do what they got to do to help the team win. So this is going to be really exciting series. But as I was kind of looking at that series and thinking of, hey, like what type of finals are we going to have? It started me thinking about maybe some of the best matchups I've seen kind of coming up watching basketball. And so I ended up posing the question on Twitter or X and asking some folks, and I got some really good responses. I'm pretty sure I think I have some responses rolling in still, but I'll focus on the ones that I got before we started recording. And so Edward Hollowell on Twitter, he kind of mentioned the Pistons versus Lakers in '04. For him, just kind of talking about how the Pistons were so dominant in that series. It was their first chip in, I think that would make 24 years. So since the Isaiah Thomas Bad Boy Pistons years, that was their first time being back and being able to get a championship. My mom was a big Chauncey Billups fan. My dad loved him because he was drafted by the Boston Celtics once upon a time. Rip Hamilton from UConn, Ben Wallace, Hall of Famer Ben Wallace. We're talking about Rasheed Wallace. So um, a really good group of players. Lindsey Hunter was a guy who I really loved growing up, just the way he always made the right play at the right time, especially on defense. Tayshaun Prince, who had a big block during that playoff run to get the Pistons to the NBA Finals against the Indiana Pacers. So it was really good. It would have been nice had they drafted Melo that year, or that year, and he would have been able to retire with a ring and something like that. But really good series. We were talking about the Lakers, who we had the three-peat Lakers. Then we had, Kobe was kind of going through his case in Colorado that whole season. They made their version of super team pairing Kobe and Shaq along with Gary Payton, who had come over from the Supersonics. Then you had Karl Malone coming in from the Utah Jazz, who was still playing pretty well at a high level. He, of course, missed that series, right? And that might have been the deciding factor in the Lakers not winning. We saw Kobe probably have one of his worst final series in his career. Shaq was Shaq, still dominant, but it was never enough. Detroit just kind of had that collective power. So that was a good series. I remember my family and my grandmother, she had one of her best friends was in Jersey during that time. And so she took me and some of my cousins, and we were in the Greyhound bus station during that game 5. So we actually got to watch a little bit of it. Crazy. The TV was kind of fuzzy, so you could hardly see it, but we got to watch a little bit of that series or that game uh, clinching performance by Detroit in game 5. Um, so it was really neat. Really great summer, probably one of the best summers of my life, albeit 20 years ago. But good job, good choice, Eddie. That was a good option. Cam Doncic, I guess he's He's going with Cam Doncic because of Luka Magic right now. But Hoodie Camo too on Twitter. He actually mentioned one as well. He talked about the Miami Heat versus San Antonio Spurs. Now, anybody that knows me knows that that's a soft spot, a really, really soft spot, because that series broke my heart. But it led to a great bounce back in 2014. But to Cam's point, it was a great series. There was some high level basketball being played on both sides. Of course, I wish that the Spurs would have sealed the deal. And now we're talking about possibly Tim Duncan retiring at 6-0 as in the NBA Finals, and he probably was going to end up with his fourth Finals MVP had they secured the victory in 2013. But Bron and his cast had something to say. Obviously, Bron had a great fourth quarter in that Game 6, bringing them back into it, and Ray Allen was able, off the offensive rebound by Chris Bosh, was able to get them into overtime. So great series. It didn't end the way I wanted it for my team, but great series. That was a great pick, Cam. Coach Sip Nola, my boy Coach Sip, who's been a guest on this show. You guys got to check out his podcast, Film Don't Lie. Man, one of the best breakdown artists in the game today when we're talking about the game of basketball. It don't matter how young or old. We're talking high school kids all the way up to the professional level. He's doing a damn thing, being able to break down film, help some of those athletes get better, but I think also bringing some of the casuals of the game and making it what's the word? I don't know the word I'm looking for, but they can kind of, gravitate towards the game. They can kind of absorb some of that information. They have an idea of what they're seeing. So he's doing great things with his podcast. I mean, his journey now in Georgia, but he had some really good ones. Boston, LA in 2008. One of the reasons why he said that one just was the anticipation of the two staple franchises in the NBA, talking about Boston and LA. Those are two stable franchises, and it met expectations, and it did. I remember watching that series, and he mentioned Golden State Warriors versus Boston in 2022. Talked about how Steph had called his shot the year before. He was saying, hey, we're going to be back. I promise we're going to get it done. Like, it's not over. And he comes back in next year, gets his guys in the playoffs, does some damage there, gets to the NBA Finals, and goes nuclear, essentially. We thought Boston might have him, but Steph said, no, sir. And he kind of took that series over alongside, Andrew Wiggins was a big part of that series as well. And having Clay definitely helped. But that was a good pick, Coach. He also mentioned the Heat Spurs in 2013, but he also wanted to add 2014. Kind of mentioned, hey, Tim had called his shot, leading up to the finals and said, hey, we know who we want. We got 4 more to win, and they were able to do that. So I'm glad he at least listed 2014 along with 2013. Cavs, Golden State in 2016. Greatest comeback ever. We're definitely going to dive into that one as we talk about my top 5. And then he mentioned the Bulls versus Jazz in '98, the shot by Michael Jordan that secured the 6th championship, the second three-peat in his Bulls tenure, and capped off his career as a Chicago Bull before he came back a few years later with the Wizards. My guy, Soup K. Kula on Twitter as well, kind of mentioned Boston. He didn't give me dates, but I just assumed, I just decided to say both. So he mentioned the Boston LA series. So I mentioned 08 and 2010. Miami versus Dallas, 06, where Dwayne Wade kind of took over, but also 2011, where Dirk and Jason Terry and Sean Stevenson, Jake Kidd, JJ Barea, all those guys went nuclear. Then we talk about Miami versus San Antonio. I mentioned 13 and 14 in those. Cleveland and Golden State, 2016. I think if you asked anybody what their top 5 was, you got to include that Cleveland versus Golden State series in 2016. And then he also had the Chicago versus Utah 1998 shot. And so definitely got some really good feedback posing the question. Like I said, I'm pretty sure some other people are mentioning what their favorites were, and we're going to make sure to definitely add that when we post this episode. But my top 5 is, again, as I was kind of thinking about, hey, we're getting into the NBA Finals. What were some of the best matchups that I saw and experienced as a fan of this game for 25 years now. So my top five, I start with the 2008 NBA Finals, LA versus Boston. That was Kobe's first finals without Shaq. And knowing that Shaq had won the NBA Finals 2 years prior without Kobe. So there was a lot of pressure on Kobe. We knew everything that happened with his image, with the Colorado situation. And so this was his way of getting back to the mountaintop. And it was his opportunity to be able to do that. And this was the first NBA Finals in a long time since the Bird era for the Boston Celtics, and they had their year one of their big three with KG coming over from Minnesota, Ray Allen coming over from the Supersonics, and the truth himself, Paul Pierce, being that guy that stayed the course in Boston when a lot of his running mates along the way were leaving, like an Antoine Walker, Tony Batiste, guys like that were no longer there, and he stayed and he got two of the best players in the league, and they were able to run a table, and they ended up winning the six. And so it was good. I remember KG, anything is possible. It was, my mom loved him, big fan of his, and it was just good to see somebody like KG who had worked so hard, had tried so hard during his time in Minnesota to get a ring and just couldn't get it done. And for him to be able to do that with the Boston Celtics, that was great. And obviously, Ray Allen, one of the greatest shooters of our game, but was one of the best players of our game during that time as well. And so him making a sacrifice, right, to say, hey, I'm just going to be a guy coming off screens being a shooter, not a guy used to having the ball in my hands a ton anymore. So that was good for him. And obviously Paul Pierce, I mean, being that guy and having two superstars join your team and those guys being able to work together was really ideal for them. And so that was a really good series. And it was set the of the 2000s. So that's number five on my list. Number four is the 2005 NBA Finals, and so that was the Pistons versus my San Antonio Spurs. And the Pistons, they were trying to go back to back. They had won in 2004 against the Lakers. They ran the gauntlet another year back. Keep in mind, I think that was at that point in time that was their maybe fifth straight year in a row or something like that, going to the Eastern Conference Finals. And so to win again and get to the NBA Finals, have a chance to go back to back, that was great. The Spurs were trying to win their third title in their team's history. And I think that would have been the third in 6 years and the second in 3, if my math is correct, because they had one in 03. So, yeah, I think my math's correct on that. But either way, they were gunning for that. And I still remember this moment because I had just come back from I went to a private school and we had our basketball championship and we had just won. Your boy hit the game winner. Just want to just point that out. Your boy can hoop. I made the game winner. And so I remember um, coming with my trophy that said like, hey, this guy was the best player in the tournament. And I had missed most of the game. Like it was a rush. Like we were in Arcola, Louisiana. And I was like, Mama, like you gotta be home in time. Like I gotta see the Spurs game. And we didn't get back home until that fourth quarter and like a few possessions in. And I remember we were down. We were down 2, I believe. And the out of bounds play call is, you know, pass the ball to Manu. Robert Horry, Big Shot Bob is inbounding the ball, passes it to Manu, who was having a phenomenal series. Some say probably should have won Finals MVP that year. And the Pistons blitz that, and Manu just does like a give and go, but he's the one giving it back to Robert Horry. And if you know anything about Big Shot Bob, he got that name for a reason. The guy made big shots with the Houston Rockets. He made big shots with the Los Angeles Lakers. And luckily for me, he made one of the biggest shots in our team's history in Game 5, which changed the momentum because Boston Pistons were on their way to winning 3 straight in that series and taking a commanding 3-2 lead. And with the Spurs having to win 2 in a row on their own home court to seal the deal. And so Big Shot Bob makes that shot. Spurs end up winning that game by 1 point, 96-95. They ended up losing game 6 in San Antonio, and so they set up game 7. And I remember that game going down to the wire. It was tie ball game going to the fourth. Tim and Mondo kind of took that fourth quarter over, and they were able to withstand and win that title. And so I was a happy camper that year. Um, Great moments during that era for me. I can tell you that much. My third favorite, or third best that I remember seeing, going back to the LA Boston was Boston versus LA. And this one happened to go 7 games. And they were going blow for blow. I mean, blow for blow. It was a night, it was like a fight. It was a war. And again, the two most prolific franchises in all of basketball were going at it for a chance to be a champion. And so that's, you can't ask for more than that. And this was Kobe trying to go back to back. They had beat the Magic in the previous year. This was their third year in a row making the NBA Finals, and they had a chance to go back to back. Um, I remember that series, Ray Allen breaking the 3-point record in a game, so that was really cool. It was a coming out party for Rajon Rondo for so long. Probably the last 3 years, it was talking about the big three of KG, Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, and Rajon Rondo was kind of really starting to come into his own. Say, hey, if it's anything, it's going to be a big four up in this mud. Now, Kendrick Perkins was out. Some say that that was the deciding factor. If Kendrick Perkins had played, maybe Boston wins this one. And Kobe goes 0-2 against the Boston Celtics in the NBA Finals. But look, you play who's in front of you, right? We're talking about that in this year's playoffs. And hey, and it was a hard fought series. The I remember the Celtics winning game 5 and being up 3-2, going back to LA, I believe. And so it was like, hey, Boston might seal this thing in 6 again. And Lakers said, hell no. And they came out with a fire, won that game, forced a game 7. And the crazy thing about game 7, it was kind of a back and forth affair. And Ron Artest hits the shots of shots. Like we talk about Ray Allen's shot, and that's probably one of the best shots up with Kyrie's shot that we're going to talk about a little bit. But um, he was struggling that whole series, really, and definitely in that game. Boston cuts the lead to 3, almost a minute left, and for somehow Ron Artest is wide open and he hits it and he gets that lead back up to 6. And then we can talk a lot about what may have happened had let's say he missed that shot. Boston gets the rebound and they go down and score, maybe tie it up. Now they have all the momentum. And we can talk about again the Boston Celtics winning that series. But it didn't happen that way. Artest hit a big shot, and that ended up being the dagger in the series and in the game. And again, Kobe was able to go back to back. And I think that really supplanted where he was in the history of this game. And knowing what he went through and fought through to get back to that mountaintop. That was really good. You guys know I'm the top Laker and Boston Celtic hater. So the fact that 2 of their series are in my top 5 lets you know how much I respect them. You don't have to like them. You can even hate them, but you have to respect what those 2 franchises mean to the NBA. And during that time, I mean, it was prime television to watch those 2 really go at it. And so that was the conclusion of the Lakers Boston NBA Finals matchups, because we haven't had that since. But it's part of me thinks we'll have that at some point in the future. I don't know when it'll be, but there's no basketball if you can't have a Lakers versus Boston's NBA Final series. But going on, number 2, and I will say this: if number 1 wasn't my number 1, this series will be my number 1. And in all honesty, I think anybody, if you ask them what was probably the best one you've ever seen, they will say it was the 2016 Golden State Warriors versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. Greatest comeback ever. Golden State goes up 3-1. We see that, Draymond gets in trouble, misses a game. Andrew Bogut gets hurt. Again, you play who's in front of you. But, I don't care who was playing. God himself could have been playing. I don't think you could have stopped what LeBron James and Kyrie Irving were doing um, towards the end of that series to rally the Cavaliers back. I mean, I think Kyrie had a game where he shot over 40, he had 40 points, but shot over 70% from the field. Like that type of stuff is unheard of, right? So it was ridiculous. And the fact that they were able to come back, force a game seven that goes down to the wire. And guys who, and y'all who have been with me, who are fans of the show, y'all know the history that I was on a cruise ship. We were on deck watching the game. They changed the game to put it on Zootopia. It's a mad dash to the nearest TV to find that moment. And we happen to find the TV. And as we're finding the TV, we see the LeBron James block, and then later on we see the Kyrie Irving shot, the shot of shots to win that game. It ended up being the dagger. And then, you look and you see Kevin Love on Steph Curry, and you're like, oh my God, Steph's about to make this shot. It's probably about to go to overtime. Golden State's going to find a way again. Best team, best record ever, 73-9, beating the 72-10 Bulls. And Cavaliers hold tight. They come back and win that series. And look, just the series alone is enough to say it's number one. But it's the impact that that series had, which even adds to that fire. You have Kevin Durant now joining the Golden State Warriors. If the Golden State Warriors win that series, are they even worrying about acquiring Kevin Durant? Probably not. Is Kevin Durant likely wanting to join that team? Probably not, because at that point, he doesn't feel like he's a missing piece. Whereas, even though they were the best team, they came down themselves from a 3-1 deficit, being down to Kevin Durant's OKC Thunder, right? They lost, and then it was like, oh man, during that series, Harrison Barnes missed a lot of shots. Hey man, if they had just another guy, and they get the guy, the prize free agent, Kevin Durant, I don't think that happens if Golden State wins that series. Hell, we might end up having Kevin Durant on the Cleveland Cavaliers. We may end up having Kevin Durant on the Washington Wizards and pairing up with Bradley Beal and John Wall, who were a real hot commodity during that time. Most people assumed that that's where Kevin Durant was going. He's from the area. They thought he was going to go to DC and play with John Wall and Bradley Beal, and he just hit a swerve on us. Ends up signing with the Golden State Warriors. So that series alone is not just impactful because of what it did for those, in that series itself with Cavaliers coming back, but I think what it did for the team, these teams in their future. I mean, Tristan Thompson and J.R. Smith get big time deals that probably they wouldn't have had if Cleveland loses. Cleveland might say, hey, you know what? Especially if they lost 3-1 or 4-1, hey, we need to think about bringing some other guys in. But instead, they said, we came back. Some of these guys were big pieces of that. Tristan, you get a new deal. JR, you get a new deal. And that may have prevented them that next year from getting some valuable help to compete with what the Warriors ended up becoming with the acquisition of Kevin Durant. But that's neither here nor there. Again, if my number one wasn't my number one, this series would be my number one. But y'all know what my number one is. And that is the 2014 NBA Finals. Spurs versus Heat rematch. And as a fan, look, after what happened in 2013, you're just saying, oh my God, I just pray that we get back. You understand that Father Time is not your friend. Timmy's getting older. Tony's getting older. Manu's getting older. Kawhi's still a pup. So you don't know what you're going to get, but you're like, oh my God, if we ever get the opportunity again, I believe that we will get it done this time. And that season, it was almost as if the Spurs were on a mission. I mean, you almost kind of assume like, man, they are trying to get back to the finals and they want their pound of flesh for the Miami Heat. And you kind of had that vibe the whole time, right? But Tim Duncan confirms this after beating Oklahoma City Thunder in 6 games to get to the NBA Finals, right? He says, we have, like, along the lines of, you know who we want, because the Heat were actually in a 7-game battle with the Indiana Pacers at that point in time. They hadn't played that 7th game yet. And so Tim Duncan kind of says, y'all know who we want. We have 4 more to go, and we're going to get it done this time. Now, keep in mind, Tim Duncan is a guy who doesn't speak above a whisper. He never really said something um, this bold before, to be quite honest with you. Not in my entire fandom of him and the San Antonio Spurs. Had never really said anything like that. Probably said some stuff like that in the locker room, maybe said some stuff like that on the court, but in the press, in the public, where people can document what you said, that if you lose this series, you're probably about to get made fun of. That's going to be your marker um, on your career. You asked for it and you received what you asked for and you lost. You weren't able to hold up to your standard. But they did it, and they did it in domination. I remember, game one, they're talking about the air conditioning and all that type of bullshit. And in game two, I personally felt like the Spurs got a bad whistle. I felt like they just wanted the Heat to win and probably make this a series. I think they wanted to relive that 7-game masterpiece that we got in 2013. And I remember telling one of my friends, I said, we were probably going to play ball with y'all. We were probably going to let it get to 6. But based on what y'all did in game 2, you will never win another game. Nikos Bulahanis, if you're watching this episode, please confirm this for me. Because he's the one I said. I said, you guys, I said, we cannot give y'all the series that the people want because we can't trust that it's going to be done fairly. I was like, was the league really trying to rig the series and all that type of stuff? I don't know. I was really speaking from emotion, to be quite honest with you, but I felt it. I felt it in my spirit that, hey, it's over for y'all. And not only will we beat you, it won't be close. It will become a slaughter. Like we're not leaving the game in a position where a ref can screw it up. Like that's not happening. It's over for y'all. And guess what? It was over for the Miami Heat. And it happened to be Kawhi Leonard's coming out party um, on both ends of the floor, offensively and defensively. I still think Tim Duncan should have won the finals MVP that year. But, when you're defending a player as dominant as LeBron James, and you make it a little bit tough. Guys, do not read me LeBron stats because guess what? The numbers when Kawhi Leonard was guarding him shows that Kawhi did a pretty damn fucking good job. So don't give me, well, he averaged this and that. No, in totality, he averaged that. Against Kawhi, those were not his averages. Dive into the metrics, please, before you try to bring up that old ass conversation. But I do think because Kawhi defended LeBron well, added some scoring on the offensive end, the voters said, okay, we're gonna give it to this guy. But I felt like Tim Duncan could have easily captured that Finals MVP as well. But it is what it is. And again, Timmy called his shot. And as a fan, and like I said, someone who had never heard Timmy speak in that way before, like I knew it was on. And the fact that they, the beautiful game is what they call it. The way they passed the ball, the way they just were great teammates on both ends of the floor. You hope that the Spurs can get there again. And look, that was our most recent one a decade ago. I mean, I was in college. I'm a grown ass man now. Like, I got a career, a wife. Like, it's time. Like, talk to my wife nowadays, and it's almost as if I'm like those folks is like back in my day, because it's been so long since the Spurs have been relevant from a championship standpoint. And so I'm wishing for the best now that we got Wemby, and I'm hoping to build around him and that we can get some titles back in San Antonio. But look, that's my number one. And to be quite frank, you always ask me what's um, my favorite or the best championship or NBA finals. I'm going to steal from the GOAT of football, Tom Brady, and say the next one. And so for me, it's the next one for the Spurs. When you ask me again, what's the next one? Wemby's first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, whatever it may be, whoever it may be on that roster, it's always going to be one of my favorites. And so looking forward to the Spurs getting back to the winning ways. But I enjoy talking about some of these games and some of these matchups because these define me as a fan of the game and a player myself. And so to see some of my colleagues on social media kind of had some similar ones, that was really neat as well because I don't mind being out of the box, but sometimes it's good to know that others are in your line of thinking. So that was pretty cool. But hey, this isn't over. When we post this episode, y'all make sure y'all drop y'all favorite ones. Hell, I mean, even some of the old school ones. I wanted to stick to ones where I truly watched and was able to grasp what was going on. And that's why I didn't mention the 1998 Bulls or any of Jordan's titles. Like I saw it watching ESPN Classics, but not enough to, from start to finish watching the whole thing like some folks may have. So if you got some from back in the day, so to speak, please feel free to comment those as well. I'm a basketball historian, so I would love to go back and watch some of those games, see what you guys saw, see what some of the names were in some of those series. So looking forward to hearing some more of your responses and kind of putting me to work to go and find some more folks or find some more matchups that maybe me or some of the responses I added to this episode didn't have. But look, as always in the show, if I offended anyone, it's a good thing, right? It's an opportunity for me to learn. It's an opportunity for you to teach me. All I ask is that you keep it respectful. Peace.